For me, it's a lot about finding out, the experience of finding out those stories that that were hidden away, those really excellently human stories about people falling in love, you know, sort of in the face of the institution, or you know how an institution, you know, tends to try to partition people away and move people into their little compartments, and how people just refuse to do that, you know, even unconsciously, and so they start to break those rules and move across and start to relate and be social, because we're really social.
We used to holler to the windows over to the girls' residence, and they would holler back, and sometimes they would creep out on the edge of the building, which was kind of scary. So I wouldn't do it myself, but you know, they say love casts out all fear, and I guess they had no fears.
It was dance duty where the patients had their own dance, and we had to take part in the dance with them.
We socialized. We'd go out there. They'd have dances in the hall, and we people would go out there. We'd go out and visit the patients. So there's a lot of camaraderie between the city and the hospital.
I think it was more that you made your own fun, just like find ways to deal with all of the madness and horrendous. It was horrendous, some of the things that you had to deal with, because there wasn't very much to work with.
I hated holidays and weekends. They were of no value whatsoever. And you couldn't go to the shows. There's no newspapers. There's no radio. There's nothing, eh? Well, going to school, well, like, it was the only enjoyable thing that I really had here, eh? You got to remember there was only about 15 kids all total, eh? There wasn't very many that went to school because they didn't know what was going on. As a rule, even off my ward, there was hardly anybody, eh?
I remember people taking someone who I didn't know to call mentally ill, but who was probably mentally ill, and putting him in a car and people holding him in the car to take him to Weyburn.
Well, you left me anyhow, and then the days got worse and worse, and now you see I've gone completely out of my mind. And they're coming to take me away, ha-ha, they're coming to take me away, ho-ho, hee-hee, ha-ha, to the funny farm where life is beautiful all the time, and I'll be happy to see those nice young men in their clean white coats, and they're coming to take me away, ha-ha!
And at Moose Jaw, we're to pick up this fella from the cells at the police station. And somehow he broke the toilet bowl, you know, the porcelain, and he just stood there like that, you know, come and get me, and the police were just scared to go down there. You've got the mattress and you're just marching behind it, you know, one arm this, one guy this, and once we're right on top, and then we just grab his arm. Grab his arm and then try and get him out, kick his feet under him, you know. So, you know, we downed him, and he wasn't even that big, you know, he was about 35. You know, of course we handcuffed him, you know, belt. But I remember that time, you know, was a case where we could have got hurt, you know.
You were told that you must never retaliate, no matter whatever a patient did, ever, because if you did, you would be fired on the spot.
He wanted me to go in the day room, and I didn't want to go in the day room. I just wanted to be out walking up and down the hallway by myself. And so he knocked me down, he kicked me in the back and all that. The doctor was going through, and I told him this guy beat me up, and he looked at my back, and he almost got fired, eh? But after that, he never bothered me again.
This was a time before tranquilizers came into existence. So we had to use manual restraint and forcibly restrain these people. And we used a drug called epimorphine, and that caused peristalsis in reverse. They got very sick and they would vomit, and this was a form of punishment.
When you're out on the yard, like at recess, you go to the ball diamond, you don't go beyond the ball diamond, but I like to see what's beyond just normal, eh? So I went up in a tree and I was looking at bird eggs, some robin's eggs, eh? And the teacher, I don't know why she was mean. She had a cork leg, eh? And she always walked like this around it. And so I don't know why she was mean. She called the administration, said I went across the road and I'm not supposed to go across the road. And so that's when they put me down in 2A, the snake pit, for 2 months, eh? There was absolutely nobody to talk to, and the patients just pooed on the floor, peed on the floor, and they had this here guy, Max Burnett, he'd come from floor to floor and clean up the mess because nobody wanted to clean that mess up, and he didn't seem to, and he always just sang that jingle, eh? Chana, chana, chana dee, oh, chana, chana, chana dee. You need earplugs, it was just all he said, eh? You get all this here smells coming from the floor, just like being on a farm, staying in the pen that has never been cleaned out, eh?
So I'm latexing over everything that's here. And what will happen is after I'm finished and I pull it off, whatever loose will come off with the latex and it will be embedded in the latex.
I'm interested in the idea of public and private space and what goes on behind closed doors and where that transition takes place. And there are obvious boundaries within an institution because we put up walls and we put up barriers and we put up bars to contain patients or clients, whatever we're calling them these days.
The wall is pretty much a metaphor for the hospital itself, kind of this separation that happens between different people within society and kind of the taking away of people from society and put into an institution.
We did have rooms in the basement where if people were aggressive, that they would go in and there was a sliding glass so the staff could look through and see the clients, just much like you see in Alcatraz.
I can handle it.
Are you? Yeah.
But I have some ideas too.
Good.
So we'll discuss.
It's not so much a question of endurance and whether you can handle it, it's also a question of whether it's right for that. Because looking over that text, I wonder if maybe there's better places.
Yeah.
So, because there's another refractory room open that they cleared out that's really pretty eerie.
And then I went down the basement where we are now and was assigned to what they call the refractory ward. And there were 10 people inside rooms. They were all locked up and they were the more violent ones. My first encounter was with actually was a professional Italian boxer. And when we opened the door, he jumped on my partner and breakfast flew all over the place. And we had quite a time to get his hands loosened from my partner's neck.
One has to be very quick. If there was an upset individual in the room, as you could be the recipient of a plate of food plus a cup of hot coffee. They press these in, so then they come flying through here.
I went to the door. She didn't see who it was. She was in. All she had was a little peephole. I opened the door to give her some food, and she knocked the tray out of my hand and pulled me across the floor by my hair. And then she put me down. Oh, Joe, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And forever, for months and months and months and months, years even, she would remember that. And she said, I thought it was the other lady. She said, she'd been treating me so bad. She said, I thought it was she. I was going to show her who was boss.
Wow. After a bit, not being here all that long, you gradually develop relationships with patients, and it wasn't so frightening.
You get attached to the people you're working with. And some experiences are very heartwarming, and they could tell us stories whereby We were touched by their stories, by their why they're here and what they're doing here, how roughly they were treated back home and so on. And we became quite attached to these people. One of the staff became so attached that he eloped with one of the patients, one of the girls, and we didn't see him. He didn't come back for his paycheck, no.
Church was like to be a fairly solemn event in my way of looking at things. So of course I was put on church duty, and down I went with a group of patients. On the way in, one of the ladies, who was quite uninhibited, said, "How the hell are you, Reverend?" Shook his hand and sat down. Shortly following that, one of the other epileptics had a severe seizure and fell to the floor. And somebody just went and got her and attended her, and away she went for a bit. Then she came back and sat down. And of course, one of the patients was playing the organ, you know, in a sort of a way. There was a fellow here, he always wore a Boy Scout outfit at all times. And he marched into the church. He had been out in the hall, and he marched into the front of the church with a paper bag over his head, and just at that point of the end of the Onward Christian Soldiers, he whipped off the paper bag and saluted the minister. And the minister said, "Thank you, Winston." And I'm trying desperately hard not to laugh because, I mean, there was nothing else to be done.
Psychiatric nursing became a separate and registered profession in Saskatchewan. The trainees gradually discovered hope and motivation and a whole range of ideas about relating to the mentally ill. So they removed psychiatric nursing from the stigma of custodial care or the role of the prison guard and pushed it to a new level.
We were given direction, but not a lot, because there were so many new people, and there was summer relief, and there was, you know, many, many things to deal with and cope with. But we were expected to do things that were really beyond our skill level at that time. And even though all the supervisors were very supportive and tried to show us how to do things, they were expended themselves. But they did, most of them, I would say 90% of them were very compassionate, and they taught us well.
One incident. The resident decided she was going to smash windows. And before we could subdue her, she had smashed 3 windows, cutting her wrists and bleeding severely. Call the doctor. Suture the severe cuts. And give the resident a sedative.
Maybe I should do it as a nurse, setting pills beside the bed, doing her nightly routines, but there's actually nobody in the beds.
Okay, that's great. But you know what? I guess what I kind of want in a way, if possible, is for you to do that in here. Is there a way, like, and what I mean by that is, this was the ECT unit, we know that for sure.
Oh,
and it was also an insulin place. Leo Belanger came by the other day and he said it was ECT and insulin. So this room is a gold mine.
There was lobotomy, and one flew with a cuckoo's nest. And if you had an extremely aggressive patient, they were lobotomized, and it calmed them down. I think what they did is they lost a lot of their emotions, and they lost a lot of their feelings. There was group therapy, an attempt to try to get people to talk about what their anger was from, or what their concerns were, or what their anxiety was based from. There was activity therapy. I know we had music therapy at that time, because there was a concept that music had a lot to do with trying to calm people down. There was also insulin-shock therapy. There was hydrotherapy when I first came to, and that was an attempt to use water to calm people down.
I kind of approached it addressing the hallmark approach to illness. Wishes, thoughts, and prayers. Do they actually have some sort of a healing potential? You know, I mean, the color and the images and the objects and the birdies and the kitty cats and the puppy dogs, the praying puppy dogs, sort of lends a certain cheeriness. And if I was bedridden, it would certainly make, you know, I think it would make me feel better. But if I were mad, I don't know.
People that were violent, we would give them a few electric shock treatments. And the doctor would carry the electric box, and we would place the prongs on the person's temples, one on each side. And then he would say, we'd say when we were ready, he'd press the button and give them a certain voltage, and it'd knock them out. And we'd use this shock treatment for maybe once a day for about 9-10 days, and this subdued them.
When I first came here, the electroconvulsive therapy was straight. In other words, you tried to convince the patient to lay down. If you didn't, he ran and you went and caught the patient, and he was brought back and he received ECT cold. Then it was a couple years later, of course, then it was with the anesthetic, and they were out when they got the treatments.
Just around the corner where you are there, that's where they did shock treatments, and I can see these guys, they were just going crazy, eh? And then they'd be, you're next, you're next, you're next. And I don't know, it's not me, I don't want to be next. Like that when they did it, whatever they did, and then they'd do it again. You see the body shake, eh?
In the spring, when he put the crop in, he was worried that he wouldn't get a crop. He'd get depressed again the fall when it was spring and the harvest time. And he'd come in for shock treatment. And he improved and he went back home. But in the fall, he was back again. So he was taught this over, you know. He was kind of a smart guy. And he said, well, if that's all you guys are going to do to me, I think I can maybe manage at home. So when he felt his depression coming on, he would start up the tractor, he'd grab a hold of the spark plug, and he'd knock himself out. He'd fall on the ground. And then he'd get up, and that was it. He took shock treatment. And he'd do this a few times, once a day, and you know, we never seen that guy again.
I have my own opinions about the lack of effect of any of these treatments. I never saw them being beneficial at all. I don't know what the literature proves, but with the major phenazines, you were able to reduce the psychosis and then start dealing with some of the issues.
My dad told me a cute little funny thing that happened years ago when Tommy Douglas came to visit the mental hospital. There were patients working in the garden, and Tommy wanted to make conversation with them, so he asked one of the men about the strawberries that were growing abundantly. Tommy asked, "Do you put manure on the strawberries?" And the patient looked rather surprised and answered, "No, we put sugar on them."
Then, Dr. Humphrey Osmond took over the superintendency of the hospital, and he walked onto the wards to make his first official rounds. And the staff stood to attention, as they always did, and then hastened to unlock the doors for him. "Please, don't get up for me if you're talking to a patient," he said. "Your patient is the important person in this hospital. I can unlock my own doors." And practically overnight, the ideals the staff had learned in lectures became possibilities. The hospital set about bringing itself out of the Middle Ages and into the 20th century.
He was very interested in research, and he also knew how to get money and convinced the politicians that this was what needed to be done. So at that time, and it did attract doctors from all over the world. You know, people from the Menninger Clinic were here, and people from sociologists from other countries, and doctors that were doing research. So it was a very promising time to work here.
There's a research department in the basement when I was here that had test tubes, microscopes, just like you see in the movies. And there was some PhD psychologists and other medical individuals whose sole job was to do research.
We're going to have a psychiatric nurse here. She's relaying a story about a psychology student, a nurse, who took some LSD from Dr. Humphrey Osmond. And as you've probably heard, the staff took LSD down here so that they could have better empathy with patients who have schizophrenia.
After taking the drug, she sat outside in the dirt in the flower garden. She sat, letting the dirt run through her fingers.
What I'm doing in this space is that I will be creating a maze of sorts, maybe giving them some sort of experience, which may or may not be related to the type of experience one got when they were on LSD.
These twins were admitted, they were identical twins. So it was very significant. People from the University of Saskatchewan, researchers came, the psychiatrists, psychologists, studied these individuals. Maybe this was an opportunity of finding a commonality with schizophrenia. The one twin was on medication, the other twin was not, was on the placebo. The twin that was on medication was on a very high dose. We know that nowadays, a very, very high dose. That individual got into the bathtub, put the plug in, unsupervised, and scalded himself to death, which is horrible. At the same time, his identical twin brother, 2 wards down, was screaming and yelling. And this is documented.
The drugs didn't necessarily cure the patients, but they made them more accessible, minimal to treatment. You could talk to them and they'd get into programs and, you know, be more active and more cooperative.
The pain associated with a physical illness, take cancer, take any other type of disease, is tremendously horrible. But that perhaps is over after 4 or 5 years. The tremendous images some of these people had that maybe ants were in their skin or that their internal organs were rotting out. They had those horrible anxieties for years. When the major tranquilizers and the major treatment medications were introduced, you could see people start to reduce some of these overt psychotic symptoms, and it was tremendously satisfying to see that happening.
One of them would bite everybody the minute she'd just go around biting everybody. After the Largactil and all of the trials and getting them on the proper doses, there she was sitting at the table eating with cutlery and fully dressed. It was like a miracle to me. I thought, isn't that something?
It wasn't too good, your relationships with the community, if somebody was at large in the community. But we had a very well-organized fan-out system where if Mr. X or Miss X was missing, there's certain procedures that would go in place, and we would be out there trying to find them.
It took 2 months to set it up, because the girl I wanted to run away with, she was in my class at school, but we were both out of school at this time, because she was 16 too. And they were always wondering how anybody could get a girl from there, because it was the most difficult thing to do, but if you spend months at it, you can figure it out. And so away we went, and I always used to think to myself, it'd be sure nice if I had her holding hands. We're going down the railroad tracks that aren't there anymore, and it was pretty darn nice, actually. Something you'd like to have happen for over a year, eh? And somebody you could actually talk to and all that, but she was lacking education. I knew she didn't have the social skills to function normally, but she was still my best friend anyway, so. And we went down the side road and down the railroad tracks to Weyburn. And the first day, we were just out in the field. And well, this here doesn't seem like a very good runaway deal, but we stayed there all day because we didn't want to be seen. And by morning, we were part way to Regina, and we started hitchhiking. The guy gave us a ride the rest of the way, and stayed in Regina for most of the day. And then nighttime, we went to visit my school teacher. Oh, how'd you guys happen to be together? I said, well, we ran away. And she said, okay, I'll get you some more lunch, if you want. But she called the police, And the cops took us downtown. Then they took us back, and then an hour later, we were locked up in rooms for 3 weeks. And you realize if you run away, where you run to, they only bring you back all the time. So.
When Dr. Osmond came, and he thought the patient shouldn't be confined, and he opened the door, and one day, and everybody, and there was 2,000 of them, and they all came streaming out, and they went all over town, and they didn't know where they were. Well, of course, the citizens in Weyburn just had a fit, and he said, you can't do that. So they got back all the ones that they could, and then they started putting them out in little group homes and that sort of thing. Well, that was okay. A friend of mine that worked out there, I can remember talking to him on the street one day, and he says, you know what, it's what's the count today rather than how is everything. It's what's the count today. He was trying to get everybody out.
I would think it'd be about 1964, the Department of Health, under leadership of the superintendent at that time, decided to initiate what was called a psychiatric reform or mental health reform in Saskatchewan. And the idea was to reduce number of psychiatric beds, people in psychiatric hospitals. I don't think it was done for the right reasons. I think it was done for money. It was like very expensive to run these facilities. The concept was good, but the fact that they didn't put infrastructures in place to be supportive of these individuals in the community was not good.
How's our audience today?
No idea.
I can't find you.
I'll be here. I'm not moving an inch now.
All kind of, well, it's mainly rain actually. I think that's what.
Well, we have a girl.
Have a great show. Good show. Good job.
It's really important how the public comes in and interprets this building and how to have a relationship to the past. And we celebrate the fact that their relationships will be multiple, they'll be plural and diverse, because that, I think, is more in keeping with the way people really experience the world and the past.
Oh, thank you very much. Nurse Runge, thank you. And your name?
Rita.
Rita, nice to meet you. Rita? Dave. Please have a seat. Welcome. Welcome to the institution. Okay, good. Are you eating well and sleeping well and bowels moving regularly?
Yes. Generally, yes. Okay. No problem.
Okay. And sir, if you could be a car part, which one? Car part? Yeah, a car part. Any part of the car. Which part do you think you'd be?
I think the engine.
Engine?
The engine.
And why?
Performance.
Performance. Excellent. You will be in the green group today. I think that's the best group for you according to your answers, and you'll be in the green group as well. Good.
I want the audience to reconsider this building. It's a building that's vexed with a really complex and fraught history. People have very strong feelings about it, both positively and negatively.
This site installation focuses on the stigma of labeling the mentally ill. Were you aware that since about 1975, the care of the aged and the mentally ill is the new industry of Saskatchewan? The primary functions of this industry are: everyone is a potential patient. Health is focused as a community-based service, so there is no concept of discharge. Patients flow in and out of the system for quick adjustments and repairs. Do you know that the mentally ill have endured in silence the stigma of labels and name-calling? The Mental Hygiene Acts of Saskatchewan from 1953 through 1960 contained labels such as mental defective and mental deficiency, but in 1961 those labels were changed to mental retardation. I appreciate your attention. Your next new appointments are waiting for you in the adjacent room.
We had a pleasant ride to Weyburn. Then we turned into a long driveway and into what looked like a park There's lots of grass and trees, people walking about, or others just sitting on benches in the sun. I was at that time about 12 years old, and I had no idea what to expect inside the building. My first impressions were disconcerting, and I stayed close to my father.
Welcome to the Delta Vesbro Hotel.